gucken schien. Also. Lief alle gut, und am Namen vom Chef der Gemeinderat von der Gemeinde Schëtter begrüßen ich herzlich den Aufenthalt für die 3 Projekte vorzustellen, die an der ersten Phase vom Urbanistenkonkurs für die Neugestaltung vom Dorfzentrum von Schëtter zurückbringen. Ein großes Merci, dass ihr euch noch Zeit geholt habt, für heute dabei zu sein. Auf verschiedenen Workshops hat man zusammen mit dir eine Schach aufgestellt.
Through different workshops today, we had, through different workshops together with you, we planned a tender from which 19 projects were handed in, and our jury got retained 3 entries. This is a new step on the way to new village centres for Schëtter to redevelop them and to adapt them to the needs of the next generations and make into a modern municipality. We are really happy of the great interest and big participation in this planning that we have gotten from you through the workshops. Unfortunately, the current sanitary situation has put a spoke in our wheel, and we're not able to continue the workshops together with you as we had planned. We had to find a new way, and through this survey that we have distributed, we would like to continue to closely plan you into the planning process. It's of course difficult to get all the information in one booklet. We've tried our best, and tonight you will get more information. With your survey, you can give us your comments and your proposals, which we will pass on to the 3 planning consultants to integrate them into their projects. We're hoping for a lot of feedback from your side, and that together we can create a village centre which corresponds to the expectations and wishes of the residents of this municipality. I would like to say thank you to all the people who have helped make this, organize this evening. And as the mayor and aldermen, we are looking forward to your suggestions. I will pass the word directly to Mr. Christian Zanter of the Dres and Sommer Bureau for the program of tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Zanter. I'm from the office Dres and Sommer, and I have this wonderful task of presenting the various details of what we're going to, of the entire presentation. I have brought the entire team, which is going to support me, and we are all going to bring you into the entire subject. Mr. Mayor did present it partially, and what we are, where we stand now, that is what we're going to look at, and what we plan ahead is also something that we're going to go into. We have created guidelines, and these guidelines have taken their place, their due place in the specifications booklet. So we are going to look into that, and the presentation of the 3 presentations are going to be that of those who've been retained in the competition. Then you'll have the various questions that you will have to ask, and you'll get to ask, and we will be able to answer. Like I said, I'm not going to be alone, and I'm very happy that Ms. Diane Dupont, who is the president of the jury, is present here amongst us. And she's also going to tell us what the jury based its decisions on. She is the representative of the Housing Ministry, and the jury has actually agreed to take on this project, and we would like to thank the Ministry for that. Then we have Mark Leonard, who is the representative of the Buildings Commission in the Schëtter municipality, and he's one of the, if not the most important person who is going to actually take on the questions. He's going to receive all the questions that you are going to send in via email, and then we will regroup those questions if need be, and then ask them as required. We have also brought a few people from the jury, just to tell you a bit of, well, pre-jury, because the jury did take about 2 days to analyze the projects and chose the 3 best projects in their view. And it was quite a work-filled day, work-intensive day, because there were 19 projects that they had to analyze, and that is why we had a pre-jury who actually took all the projects, went through them, and did not tell us what was good or bad, but they just outlined the projects for us and pointed out whether the project had satisfied the basic recommendations and specifications requirements, shall we say, of the project. And then if there were questions pertaining to a given project, then the pre-jury was called upon to provide answers. We had Tanya Velas, who is responsible for the urbanism and urban development, and then we have Michael Agostini, who is from Dresden Sommer, and then we have Max Backes, who is also the expert in mobility, who is also going to give a presentation. From Schröder and Associé he comes. Now let's move on to how things are going to pan out during the course of the evening. And we have created an email address just for us. It's centrum@schutrange.lu, so CENTRUM @Schutrange, which is the name of our municipality, .lu, of course. And you can, if you have any questions or suggestions or remarks, you can send them out via email to that email address. Just to repeat it, it's centrum@schutrange.lu, and I have presented you with all of those who are going to be participating in this evening, and Mr. Leonard is going to receive all those questions that and comments that you send out, and we will then be coming back to that during the course of the evening, of course. You also have the possibility to share your thoughts through the questionnaire that we have that is going to be distributed, or is being distributed, shall we say. And what has been done thus far, that is what we want to see. Well, in 2013-14 we had a Café Schëtter, which was nothing more than the participation of citizens in the creation of this new project, shall we say. And then from there we went into 2 centers. One was destined to the schools, where we had the school center, the school campus, and then we had the other one concentrating on the administration, the municipal administration as such. And then something else that was also said then was that the church square is actually only a big parking space. Now, the commune said that we would like to have a work group together, where all the representatives of each political party was taken in, And the aim was to create the optimal mood of that square, or to improve the optimal mood of that square. And then now the work group then actually created a questionnaire and carried out a poll, shall we say, amongst the associations in order to find out how much they would like to participate. And then we had a company from Stuttgart which actually came and accompanied these associations. And the active associations, there are quite a few active associations in Schëtter, and they have corresponding needs. So this improvement was justified, and then we had the project of coming up with a concept for the new cultural center. Now, in 2019, we were asked by the commune, the Schëtter commune, to look into what the wishes of the municipality as such and the municipal team, because it was obvious that if we had to create a new center, the citizen had to be in the middle of this new creation, and therefore we had to integrate your wishes and your ideas, which is why we created 2 workshops. And one of them was the Kickoff Workshop, and I think you do remember that, in September 2019, where we had the best and the worst dreams and wishes, shall we say. What you absolutely don't want to have and absolutely want to have, on the other hand. And the workshop was closed off with the 3 top priorities of that which they wanted, and each one was able to express themselves on that. Based on that, we created a second workshop, which was the visionary workshop, which gave birth to very controversial subjects. Some were for some subjects, some others were against them. And then we came up to this, based on those reactions, we were able to create the guidelines based on which we set forth the project as it stands today. And that is what called us to base our guidelines for the competition. And then in this workshop, we also had this prioritization, which were mostly concentrated on traffic, and then social, urbanism, and nature, of course. So in 2020 we had and this happened just before 2020, so we were able to meet each other. So that's when we were able to present the guidelines to you. Some of them were not really put on the final list, and we also told you why that was the case. After that, we also had a call for tenders, where I personally had the mayor on the telephone, and we wanted to look at were we going to actually call for tenders during lockdown? And well, did we have? Are we going to have a pandemic? Are we going to have an economic crash? And it is good that they will be happy to receive a project from us, but we were also very conscious of the fact that if we are going to be on lockdown, it's not going to it's going to make things easy, and that is why we had to create our own offices, and so we postponed the entire project to August 2020, when 19 officers, architects presented their ideas and their models. On the 15th and 16th of December 2020, we had the two meetings by the jury, the two sittings, deliberation sittings, and the three who were selected are being presented to you today.
So we always promised that we would present the three projects that we retained to you and that we would ask for your opinions. Again, like we did the last time through these workshops, where we could work together to get your opinions. Unfortunately, COVID made that impossible. Of course, we didn't know that the pandemic was coming. So we very quickly realized we couldn't do the classic workshops. So in October we thought, even though the process has gone a bit slower, we were still hoping that we could maybe do the workshops, but then actually we realized that it won't be possible to have these classic type workshops in the near future. So for the municipality, but also for us, it was extremely important to get your opinion on those three projects. Because in the end, this is your village center that we are planning to redevelop. So in the last months with the College of Aldermen and the Service Technique, we've had a lot of thought into how we could get your opinions. And then we came to this idea that we could do it through a survey, like the questionnaire. We know that it's difficult for you when you get a questionnaire with maybe the plan next to it to understand these projects in depth and give you your opinions. So that's why the idea from the College of Aldermen was to make this booklet where we go into the history of this project and present the three projects. It's important to say that the texts which are in the booklet are not texts that we wrote, but the actual texts that the consultants, the planners, have handed in to us, where they explain it in their own words. Then we said, well, maybe these plans aren't enough. They're too small to see them properly, so that's why we put them in a large format, so you can download them and you can zoom in on the digital versions to see the detail. We also put some thought into those people who might not be so digitally native. Well, those people are welcome to look at the projects which will be presented in the village square in a large format. So once the booklet was ready, we said, okay, this is a nice booklet, but I'm sure there will be questions when people read this through. And that's how we got the idea to do this digital event that we have today, where we present the projects in depth and where you can send us your questions. So how will this continue? Well, you have the questionnaire, which has to be handed in by the 6th of May. That's the deadline. The political parties also get more time to come up with their recommendations. And then in the summer, we will have the first colloquium. It will be another session of the jury who will meet with the three planners. And they will look into the results of the survey. They will also get the feedback from the political parties and, of course, the analysis of the jury, which the jury will have done. So all this information will be given to the three planning bureaus so that they can put these into their final proposals. Well, I've talked a lot now. It might be interesting for you to know who was in this jury. Well, the president is Diane Dupont, who was presented before from the Ministry of Housing. This jury is composed of 13 people. The law stipulates we have to have an impair number, so that an odd number, so that when decisions are taken, there is a clear bias. All the political parties have one member in the jury. Mr. Jones as the mayor was there, Robert Houtmacher as representative of the CSV, Annemarie Nagel from the Greens, Serge Eicher from the Democratic Party, Claude Marsan from the LSAP, and also Mr. Lehnert, who is the representative of the Building Commission at the municipality, Cynthia Schneider from the Environmental Ministry, Thierry Schwartz from the Pont-et-Chaussée, Claude Schumann from the Ministry of Interior, Thomas Weckerle from the OAI, the architects. It was important for us to have an architect on board to give a different opinion. And Mr. Niebuhr from the planning's consultant Simplan. Why Simplan? Well, it's because that's the planners who have done the new urban plan of the municipality, and also Stephanie Schmidt from the water department. So you can give us your opinions, and to do that we have worked on a survey, the questionnaire, which you can see on the right side of the screen. This was handed out to you together with the booklet. So you have 3 ways to get this questionnaire back to us. There was an envelope there which was pre-stamped, so you can send it back to us at the municipality. But we also have a letterbox that you can drop it into, which is the one on the picture, or you can scan it and send it to us by email on the centrum@schutterange.lu email. Important with this questionnaire is that it's anonymous. You get a code with a number of 8 digits, and that will ensure that nobody will know whose questionnaire is being sent. When we've evaluated the questionnaire, we will also give the results on the website. And as I said, at the next jury meeting, we will present those to the 3 planners. So what is in this questionnaire? Well, it's in 3 languages, French, German, and English. You can answer in 4 languages, in Luxembourgish, French, German, or English. So the language that you prefer. And so there's 5 big chapters. First, there's the general questions, then questions about the competition, and then to the 3 different projects. To go a little bit more in depth on these, so in the general questions, we want to know your age, your gender, Whether you are a public transport user, are you in one of the associations, active, a member of one of the local associations. And this is for us to create small clusters when we do the evaluation of the outcome. So, for example, for the Club de Jeunes, for the youth house, it's important for us to see who might be interested in those issues, or to see whether the cluster of older people are interested in other things, so that we can look at the different needs and wants of the different groups. You might say, well, you're not, my age is none of your business, so you can also not specify. You can tick the box not specified. So where, if you want to give us some information, you just cross the box, put a little cross in the box. Then the next category is about the competition, and that has two subcategories. So it's about urban planning, and the other one about mobility. An example here is, for example, how do you rate the integration of a maison médicale in a new village center? Now, if you say that that's a good thing, then you would, as in this example, put an X in the plus box. So double minus means very, very badly. I really don't want that. Of course, a minus is bad. A 0 would be, if you have a neutral opinion on this question, good is a plus, and very good would be 2 pluses.
Dann gehen wir Fragen zu den einzelnen.
Then the questions to the 3 specific projects, we've also divided them again. So these are again the issues that came up in the first workshop: centrality in urban planning, mobility and traffic, and then the public spaces and the environment. It's important to say that if you fill out this questionnaire, it would be really good if you have the booklet lying next to you. And if you think that the plan is a bit too small in the booklet, then you can zoom in if you go to our Schëtter website and you go to the category Duerfkär, where you can see it in a good resolution and you can zoom in. In this questionnaire, you also have the opportunity to give some comments. There's little text boxes where you can write your specific comments or suggestions. We would be happy if you did that in a legible handwriting, because we do have people who didn't study hieroglyphs and will want to know what you have written. Again, you can use the language that you most prefer. It would be nice if it was Luxembourgish, French, or German, or English, because that's the languages that we understand.
So
before we go to the center of this evening, the different projects, we wanted to take you back a little to the different guidelines that have been come up with through the workshops together with you. As you can see, this was pre-COVID. We could sit together at a table, nice and close together. This seems very long ago. You can't see any masks on these pictures. And on the picture on the right, you can see how we did the prioritization of the topics that came up. So what came up in the different issues, which on the social side, well, 14 people said that it was very important to them to encourage many different people to meet and to have a multifunctional space. It was important for people to have a weekly market, to have a stall or a kiosk. Concerts and celebrations were important for 11 people. To have a small shop or a cafe was important for 9 people. public space with a roof for activities when it's raining were important for 6 people. A social shop with products of fair trade, etc., was important for 5 people. Having benches was important for 4 people. Water, in the integration of water in the village was important for 4. There was some people who didn't want concerts or celebrations. The working together or to propose people to work together was important for 3. Social meetings important for 3. To have a little library or a little small library was important for 3 people. And the other issues which you can see below. Now, when we presented this to you, you can see everything that is red, circled in red, are the priorities that we put into the tender. A few things didn't make it. We have a cafe, for example. So coming up with a different cafe and create competition, we didn't see that as a good idea. We said, well, why don't we try and promote the cafe that we have at the moment? So not having concerts or celebrations, well, it was a political decision from the municipality, and that was that we do want to have events, even if they currently have to be done under sanitary measures. And then the community gardens, which are at the bottom, unfortunately, there isn't the space for those. Then, as for urban planning, the ideas that we were given is that people said they wanted multifunctional buildings, flexible for the future, and also multifunctional green areas were important for many people. Some people did say, we don't want more construction. We are against that. Others said we should use local resources, social interactions, and are important, and places to do this. We shouldn't construct everything new, but use the existing spaces. Aesthetics and atmosphere were important for some. Optimizing the space we have at the moment were important. Keeping things small, a bit of a high quality were important for some people. And then to promote people of different generations meeting and living together was important. Sustainable development and the activity and impulses should be created. Free spaces were important in the center. And then people said, well, who needs a cultural center? Well, some people said, who needs a cultural center? 2 people said we should focus more on pedestrians, and a network of green areas, and to connect them was important for 2 people. So as you can see, many of these, the ones which are surrounded in red, were taken into the tender. Some weren't. For example, the ones saying we should not construct more. But a political decision was taken that we do want to do this. The same with the cultural center. It's a political decision to say we do need this. And then aesthetics and atmosphere, well, we decided that is kind of already integrated in the tender in a different area. Then we said, well, social interactions are definitely important in this tender booklet, which we saw already when the German planners did this questionnaire with the associations. The third big area is nature, or the environment. So the integration of the element water in the village center was important for 16 people. 10 people said it was important to build ecologically. Then 10 people also said that the ecology was important in the green areas. It was said again not to construct too much, and the surrounding nature had to be integrated by 8 people to reuse things that were already there, and the natural elements was important for 8. To promote nature and nature play areas for children was important for 6. Promoting sound protection from sound was another one. Promoting biodiversity. People said it was important to have that the trees were put in sensible places, and also for 4 people, the construction needed to allow for water to penetrate. Renewable energy from regional products was important. Village center for people and nature. For 2 people, it was very important that the quality of air was high. And again, 2 things weren't taken into the cahier de charge: the no more construction, or which we had before, and the same, the second from the bottom, to have a clear, to have the green elements very separate from other areas, and we didn't think that that was how we want to go forward. The next issue is mobility. 16 people said it was very important that a shared space would be integrated, cycleways towards and pedestrian ways towards the center had to be secured. 8 people said we should get rid of the cars in some spaces. And 8 people said that we should have more soft mobility and to have a one-way traffic through the municipality. The integration of the shuttle bus, the soft mobility through better infrastructure was important for 8 people. General security for traffic, but also for pedestrians, was important for 7 people. For 6 people, suggested underground parking, which was an idea specifically next to the cemetery or behind the cemetery. And then cycle paths between the villages, that they should be finished. And then 4 people talked about a kiss and go. 3 people said that access without cars should be promoted. And then the mobility hub for each parent group, age group was important, and 2 people talked about a street, a bypass for the village. So the mobility hub, which would be a space where you can rent a bike or a car, those are solutions that we think are more for the urban landscape and not here in our rural communities. It's a bit overdone. It's a bit too much, we've decided. The kiss and go, we didn't keep it because that's specifically for the schools, very handy, where the children kiss their parents goodbye and get out of the car. And we are not planning another school, so we left that out. And the one-way traffic through the village, well, you have to know that the main street which crosses the center of the village is a national road. So as the municipality, we don't have any jurisdiction over this. And the same is true for a bypass. And we said that that is not a project that in this urbanistic competition we could keep as a criteria. So much from me. We would then continue with the presentation of the 3 projects. I would pass the word to Michel of the pre-jury, who would explain about these.
Ja, vielmals merci. Guten Abend.
Thank you very much.
Den Deel von der Pre-Jury.
So I will present you the pre-jury part of the different entries and the 3 bureaus who sent in those entries. So number 1 is of the planners Metaform. They are a Luxembourgish planning bureau who are continuing into the second round. The second one is a working group of several bureaus, and these are Kael, Larouade, and Ernst and Partner. And the last bureau is from Trier in Germany, and the first 2 are Luxembourgish. The third entry is from Balini Pitt, which is again a Luxembourgish bureau, who also came into the next phase of the paid consultation. I would present them one after the other. Of course, I won't do that on my own. Mobility will be presented by Max Bacchus, and the strengths and weaknesses, but also the recommendations of the jury, will be presented by the president of the jury. So what you can see here are the 2 visuals that the Bureau has given us with the visual 337393. It's important to say that the first picture is something that we asked for in a standardized way. So it's the important elements that we asked for, which were the overview of the whole perimeter of the project and a user scheme where it's easy to see what is being used for what, and the same for mobility and the same for public space. Then we got the other visuals and a plan for the sustainability. Then on the right, you see the 3D pictures where the Bureau was more free to give us an idea of the presentation. Well, now that helps the jury and the people outside to have a bit of an idea of what it would look like if this project was implemented. And also in the next slides that you will see that the focus is on the left part, because in this competition we're not looking at the architecture, we're looking at urban planning. So the important thing, what we need to get from here, is where are the different buildings, how much space do they take in space, but also in volume and also in height. So that's the key element that we are presenting to you here. So if you look at the usage, and to make this visible and clear to understand for you, we've put these colors in to see what is where on this map. As you can see here, the living space, the housing, would be here in the north of the project. It's the yellow color. Then the Centre Médical in red, where a building would be made. So there would be living space, housing, but also the medical center. Then here, more in the center, well, that's the redevelopment or continuation of the development of the municipal office, left in front of the municipal office. Behind that is the youth house in blue. It's in the old building where it is now. And a bit to the right of that, in orange, you would see the Scouts chalet. And that's where, so these would go into the old fire there would be a scouts' home in the old buildings of the fire brigade. Then in the west, this big area would be the cultural center, the Kulturhaus, on the other side of the street. And it would be, and it's actually the only of the three planners of the three projects that doesn't keep the culture house where it is, but would put it over there, somewhere else. So it's important for us that these guidelines that we worked through with you, we stick by those. And of course, we want to make sure that they are implemented in the best possible way by the participants of this competition. And we wanted to show what at this moment is green. Well, that's what has been already taken into account. And so there it's visible to see what still needs to be implemented or what can still be suggested by the jury. Well, if we go to the first point, I think Christian showed you a chart before which of these guidelines were prioritized during the workshops, or which of the criteria, which were the most popular during the workshops. Those were at the top in the charts that we saw before. The first point, so, is that we would like to encourage many different people to meet, to have a multifunctional space. This project does that by creating this place here in the center, where the cultural house is, and there is different levels on the higher level, and then there's a lower level to the right, where there is a space in front of the church, in front of the municipal buildings, and where, of course, we could have a market. So that's where the first two points would be integrated. Then here, the commerce, or a kiosk, or a little shop, or a social little shop could be in this lower place, and that's the numbers 3, 5, and 7 would be included. Again, we're in an urbanistic competition. We're not at the point of the individual architecture of these buildings now, so we can't say now exactly how these would look like, but here is the space would be provided for those things. Well, concerts and celebrations, that would be the cultural house, so that's where events could happen. So that means that the cultural center, which we have at the moment, and is really the program of the culture house needs to be developed together with the associations which are interested, of course, in the space. Then, as for the benches that people suggested, they are included in this plan. You can see this green stripe here, where there's also some steps which aren't just there for going to the municipal buildings, but they also provide seating places and a small pedestrian path. So when you walk through Schëtter, you can stay there and have a seat. And then point 9 is the integrating the water, the element of water. And that would be here in front of the church in this project, to have a water fountain or such. Then the point of this participation, of this process, so when we go into the detail of the realization of these different projects, then we'll of course have to come to more detail. To promote social meetings, well, we think that's included in this proposal. of course, the specific places for events and for associations, this pavilion that could be used, where activities could be held, would be next to the culture house, which should be the social meeting point. And then point 12, at the moment there isn't an inclusion for a little book shelf, but of course that's something that we can suggest to still put this in. Then the walking space, the Siertal space for walks would be down here, and 13, the space that is considered now goes over the rail track and would take you to that nature area. Public viewing and grill possibilities aren't at the moment included in this project. Then for the urban planning, the criteria that were developed through the workshops, well, we asked for multifunctional buildings, flexibly, could be used flexible in the future. Well, that's point number one. Again, that's something that's definitely integrated. Point two, multifunctional green areas. It's a little bit wrong on the map. It's not in the cultural house, but it's on the green areas surrounding it, where we could have some vegetable gardens, but also a sports area where people could maybe have communal vegetable growing areas. Using local resources, well, that's something that will, of course, be respected when it comes to the building phase, in terms of the materials being used, as well as the catering in the cultural center, that we try, of course, to use regional products. Social interactions and making the space social, well, that's, again, something that we see inside the cultural center, so that that the activities that happen in that space should be organized in that way, optimizing the use of space as to the needs. Well, that again is the spatial planning of the cultural central important. The local associations, the Club de Jeunes, the Scouts, but also the staff of the municipality will all need to be talked to see how we organize a space inside the cultural center, and not just to build something without giving that thought. Then the promoting the living together of different generations, well, that's something that we want to, of course, achieve, that older people with reduced mobility could also come, and that's, of course, something that we looked at as a pre-jury. These projects are all accessible. We made sure, isn't there enough ramps or slants so that the different levels will all be accessible to people who might have reduced mobility. Sustainable development, well, that's, of course, using local resources is something that we always want to follow up. Attractivity, activity, giving impulse as well. There are elements that incorporate that by, for example, their architecture or through the space that they then create. Free areas, and keeping the, that's point 9, keeping the character of the village center. Well, in the tender we said that the municipal buildings as well as the church. And the cemetery, of course, have to stay where they are. And that the main elements of this village center would create a view on those through as the architectural important spaces that they are. Regional building culture, well, that's again something we will give up to the architects when we have the concrete plans, a focus on pedestrians. I am sure that Max Bacchus, who will talk about mobility, will talk about that more, but the three projects have tried to integrate those points as well as possible. And then, of course, number 12, the network of green areas and to connect these areas. Well, we know we have a Natura 2000 zone and that we are trying to bring that in through this strip that you see there, which divides this square in 2 or 3 parts, actually, leads us to the north of the project. So green areas was an important element, and here on the right you see the free areas, or the scheme of the free areas, where we have in the south the fruit trees, which we have at the moment, the orchard, which should be kept there, and then in the north we could possibly have vegetable gardens, and in the west we would have a playground which would be created. Point 1, the integration of the element of water was very important to many people. In front of the church, the element of water would be integrated through a fountain, ecological building, and the ecological green spaces. Those are elements, of course, I've talked about before, which were respected here. Point 6, the promotion of nature and playgrounds for children. You can see that here. Number 6, which would be a playground. Which was integrated here. Then point 7, which is about the promotion of sound protection, and that's where specifically to where the rails, the train passes, through the planting of specific vegetation would be achieved here. Promoting biodiversity, that would be done a little bit more in depth when the different vegetations start to be planned that we want to plant, and to guarantee, of course, that we guarantee or protect biodiversity, flora, but also the fauna of the different species which would live there, be it birds or insects. Those will be taken into account then. The use of trees, or the specific order of the trees, is point 9, and then the water penetration of the mobility, and point 10 is also present here. Renewable energies from regional production, point 11. We're already looking now that we will have to look at how the roofs would be of the different buildings, so that we could have solar energy photovoltaics installed on them. To connect the village and its landscape, well, of course, the project tries to really integrate green elements into the village center. The quality of air, and promote good quality of air, of course you do that through bringing green areas into the village center, and that plants would be cleaning the air. That's as much As you will hear from me, I would ask our expert in mobility, Max Bacchus, and when Max is finished, then we will listen to the jury's suggestion by the jury president.
Voilà, vielmals merci.
Thank you very much. And let's come down to the mobility and traffic. So there's the shared space question, which is reducing the motorized traffic, especially on the main street, and reducing the speed to 30 or even 20 in some spaces. In the neighboring streets or the by lanes, we have 30 to 20 limitations. So those would be the streets leading into the coming in from the commune, from the municipal administration building and the youth center. There is also a one-way street which has been foreseen, which will lead onto the main street. So that is the shared space part, which is visible in this project. Now, coming around to the church square, I think there's the only thing that has been foreseen is that the delivery space will be created and everything will be free of cars apart from that. With regard to bus stops, there is one integrated in the square itself. So that would be the fourth point. That will be covered. With regard to the soft mobility, which is for cyclists and walkers or runners, there are a lot of cycle paths and pedestrian paths which have been foreseen. And then there is also the very affordable infrastructure which has been foreseen to that end. And we have also foreseen security in that sense, because then once you don't have any motorized traffic, you'll have more security for the pedestrians and the cyclists. You have, going in towards the cultural center, you have various extensions to the commune, where we have foreseen 10 parking spaces for the administration employees, which are going to be along the rail tracks. Then you have the ecological parking space, which is along the symmetry, and to the north you have a multi-story parking space. You have, like I said, there is the underground parking space, which has also been foreseen, so we get the traffic out of the way, out of sight. So all the points which are marked in orange are basically not fulfilled completely. And you basically get out of the perimeter, and there are some things which you can see that there is a possibility to create cycling paths parallel to the main street, and that needs doing. And then with regard to the improvement with regard to the barrier-free mobility for the reduced mobility people, we only have one place because of the steps and because of the topography leads to some deviations or so those people are going to be at a disadvantage but we have to look into reintegrating that into the entire concept. And to make sure that the fire department and the fire truck comes all over. I'll pass it on to the president of the jury. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, even from me. And I would like to thank the municipality and the officers and the pre-jury without whom we could not have been able to do our work. My predecessors actually explained a lot over what the projects contain, and I'm going to speak to you about the strengths and the weaknesses of the projects. Now, in the first project, we found that the square that has been created is free of cars, and it is, well, subdivided into smaller segments, whereby the entire space is usable in a very individual manner. They also explained that there is a connection to the green spaces from the north and the south, and there are some various attractions such as the fountains. And the continuity of that path has been ensured. Now, it is very adaptable, and we are of the opinion that there will be some changes made, which will also be imposed by the jury. And the project is quite flexible in that sense, and it can be implemented in various phases. With regard to the weaknesses, well, the cultural center is somewhat overdimensional in our view. Now, the team would have to rethink that concept. There is also the risk that the cultural center will lead to or will cause a lot of noise. And the shared space, which was foreseen, might not function because of this noise pollution. And the small square, which is foreseen in front of the cultural center, because of the children being there, it might get quite dangerous for them because they might just run over to the street because there might be a lot of traffic. This place overlooking the square, the pavilion, so to say, is obviously, the pavilion needs some sort of a function, and it has to be flexible and has to be used on a regular basis, and therefore the place has to be foreseen to that end. So there's no centrality, shall we say, where the people will find central functions. For example, there is no medical center in that square, and there are not many houses over there. So 14 apartments, and the jury did not really think that is enough in terms of numbers. So the team is going to get that these remarks to reflect on, to create more habitable space, to think how the cultural center can be optimized and reduced in size, and the parking possibilities should also be looked into, so that we also get a centrality into the square. For example, having a medical center in the square, as I said earlier, and the shared space might not work because it might get too dangerous.
Voilà, dann,
So now it's on to the second submission, and that is the one which is from Arga Kyle and Larry and Ernst and Partner, and you can see on the left-hand side the presentation, which is quite openly presented. So it's quite a graphic presentation going into the church, and on the right hand side you can see the is an oversight of the entire project space, including the green and the mobility. Well, this one looks at three views of the building. So you have a residence, and over here you see a housing is combined with medical center, as well as the extension of the municipal administration as such. So it does get extended, shall we say, and that is the view, the difference in views that this project has as compared to the other ones. So it's more of a belvedere, which provides the municipality with the possibility of presenting or proposing activities within the village center, which is also not going to go into the elimination of cars. In this one, we have the cultural center, which is on the square itself, or in the square itself, sorry. And you will only be able to see it as a one-floor building or a one-story building, but on the other side, you will see a two-story building. Beside that, you'll also have the reformation of a square, which is going to be bigger than it is currently in front of the administrator building. So some spaces have been reused, differently put, with that as a youth center, and then the Scouts chalet is basically going to come there. You also have the morgue is also going to be at the same place as in the previous case. And that had to be extended or, expanded with the possibility of being able to celebrate some events over there. So we have looked at the various points which have been taken in. So you have the Multifunctional Square, which is quite well represented over here. And you see that there are steps over here, and it's basically in steps and levels. So you can see that there are various levels, and you see that there's a weekly market which can be organized. 3, 5, and 7. So creating a kiosk, creating of a grocery shop, and social grocery shop is not really foreseen, and we are going to take that in review that during the jury deliberations, and we will give these remarks to the participants. It was not really a specification. It was a requirement or a prerequisite, because had it been a prerequisite, we would have said that, yeah, this is not really being fulfilled, and therefore we have to refuse this submission. But the Bureau actually chooses not to fulfill a subsidiary to the prerequisites. Then you have the free spaces which are covered, which are roofed, and there are a couple of spaces with the cultural center. You also have benches which can be put up. So when you have the various levels being created, you have people. You give the people the possibility of being able to take a seat. So you also have the fountains and other water, shows. And there are various phases, it can be built in various phases. If you look at the social meetings, which can be favored or encouraged, and something that is not really been foreseen is a bookshelf, just like the previous one. And if you have if this project does foresee it, is the Sirtal agricultural park. You have the public viewing is not really foreseen in this one, and but on the other hand, you can have grills and parties and Barbies over here. Well, let's come to the urban planning. It is a multifunctional building, of course, which is flexible, which is flexible for the future with regard to the southern extension, going into the park, which is going to be behind the housing. There's social interaction, which are also going to be possible with the square itself and the buildings that are going to surround it. Optimization of the entire space is something that we have seen. We have looked at that. And that is one of the prerequisites, of course. The transgenerational collaboration is something that is also been foreseen in this project. There are also impulse generators, and it is also something that foresees, a completeness of the entire build-up, giving various buildings the different functions, such as be it on the one hand the symmetry part having a social aspect and so on and so forth. And then when we come to the green spaces, so the integration of water elements is fulfilled.
dann da manifestiert. Ökologisch Bauweise.
If you, well, we are going to have a very environmentally friendly construction, and that is, we are also going to integrate nature into it, whereby we're going to have green spaces with a vegetable garden for the scouts onto the west, and there's going to be some green space behind the houses on the west. There is going to be a more dense greenery, shall we say, which is going to reduce the impact of noise, or of the noise created. And so, you know, everything that is green is going to be maintained, but there's going to be more greenery added to that. So we are also going to have a very sensible use of trees, so that these trees are going to be integrated into the entire plan as such. So the next phase of construction is going to look into the energy, into the water saving aspect of the plan, and you will also have a maximal return of solar energy coming in from the south, of course. If you look at the manner in which the greenery is being integrated into the city, well, that is also being looked into. And then we'll have Mr. Backus to speak about the mobility, and then the president of the jury will come back again. Speaking about the mobility, you see that there is silencing of the traffic, in that the traffic is going to be limited to 30. The neighboring streets are also going to be limited. And there's also a parking space which goes next to the cemetery, and these are all shared spaces and places. Now the third point, freeing the entire square of the cars is basically not allowing any more cars into the center. Is actually the same as point 9, where we don't allow any trucks to come there. No, cars in there, sorry. So the integration of buses, you also have a bus stop in front of the cultural center and then into the street. So that covers point 4 of the guidelines. As to the soft mobility, we have thick green arrows which go right through, and those are the spaces, well, encouraging the softer mobility, which is cycling and pedestrian traffic. One going to the west and the other one going to the east, and creates the links to the various parts of the center. With regard to point 7, well, and creation of parking space, I think there is underground parking which has been foreseen, which goes next to the tracks, the rail tracks. And 18 of them will be for the employees of the commune, of the municipality, out of the 60 available. And then you have a small little parking next to the cemetery, which is going to be a short-term parking space. We also have, for the residential part, there is also space foreseen for the residential space. And we also have a barrier-free mobility, so there's only a 6% inclination, and that allows for a barrier-free access, and as well as be the access to a fire truck, or a fire engine, as we call it. So beside 2 and 8, which are somewhat outside the perimeter, I think they have been taken into consideration, but they are a little accented, and that is why we have marked it as orange. I'll give space to the jury's president now. Well, I'll come straight to the strengths of this project. Generally, it's all about mobility, as my predecessor just said. The jury spoke about the integration of the communal route into the entire concept, which we found very positive, and the manner in which the cars have been removed from the entire square, and they have quite exceptionally, as said previously, they have also created some short-term parking spaces close to the cemetery. Very good traffic concept. I don't have to add anything to that. And what really stood out with regard to the other projects is that the cultural center is it places a different geometrical it geometrically outlines the cultural center differently from the other projects, and they place it really in the center of the concept. Now, to have a cultural center which is only one floor, and it can work as a noise reduction, traffic calming, it can contribute to the traffic calming aspect of things. This project also speaks about provides the possibility to the buildings to reduce noise that is generated by the rail tracks. So the jury also really thought whether it was possible to create it as such but as dimensionally, it does not really work the way it has been presented over here. The bigger building, which they have foreseen next to the municipal building, is sort of frightening to the jury because it might be a little too massive. There is no access for the firemen next to the scout chalet. There is no access. I mean, you just cannot realistically make it happen. And the entire square is basically just a path, and it's not really a live space. And it will be a little bit more expensive because, the cultural center will be a bit more expensive because it is going to be a little more, exorbitant and, expansive, should we say. And because of the various things which have been foreseen, I think it's very difficult it has to be reviewed. Now, the youth club has to be on that square. The massive construction that we are afraid of, that I mentioned earlier, will not possibly be done in one phase, but might be spread over various phases. And how that development will take place, and the centralization of the functions basically is overlapping with each other, speaking about the medical center and so on, and the other functions of the square. Mr. Agostini can come back for the next project. And I'll hand you over to my colleague.
Voilà, da wären wir auch schon beim letzten.
Okay, so that'll take us to the last entry, the last project we're presenting you tonight. It's of Balini Pits. Again, on the left side, you can see the map with the global view and the schemas of the use and the mobility and the free spaces, and on the right, some more graphic design of the project. So, the first thing you can see in this project is that there is housing in the north, but also here in the west, and closer even to the center. So the living, again, close to the Maison Médicale on the west. The continued development of the municipal buildings would be behind the current buildings, and to put the scouts close to them, the Club de Jeunes would then move into where the fire station used to be. And the morgue would stay on its current place in a slightly larger version. So then the guidelines on social issues. So a space is created for people to meet. That would be here. Even if we have a place that has a slant, which is quite strong, so we'll have to see if it's possible to organize a market there, but I think for the next colloquium we will have answers for that. Then the kiosk would be here, next to Maison Crier, number 5. That's where a little shop would also be possible, as well as a shop selling a social shop.
Ja, dann eben Freiflächen, die dann noch teilweise
green areas or free areas that have a roof would be also here in number 6, a kind of a pavilion again near that village square with a roof. Well, putting benches, I think that's something that has to be looked at a little bit more in depth with this bureau to see in which areas that could be done. We can't see those here. The water is integrated here, number 9. And have central meeting areas would be the culture house, but also in this place. Working together with the citizens is something which I will want to repeat again. What is done now, but also again in the next phases. The bookshelf isn't set in this map yet, as well as neither is the public viewing or the barbecue areas. So, but they will need to be put in. As for the urbanistic futures, we have the culture house here, number 1, and the multifunctional green areas would be here, and 2, a kind of a park. and in the west here and in the north have a little bit less green areas, whereas it has more housing than the other two projects. So using local resources, again, is something that's still possible that we will look at into the next phases. Then the social interactions and the spaces that are created, that's also there, optimizing the spaces. I think the municipality, the Scouts Chalet and the Cultural Center will cover that. Sustainable development is, of course, something that we will always ensure, as well as the living together of different generations, where through creating these places that are also there for people with reduced mobility. The village center stays, of course, with the church, which has its fixed place. The regional building culture will be ensured. The focus on the pedestrians will still be detailed more by Max Bacchus. And the networks and the green areas and connecting green areas also. So as for the nature or environmental considerations, the integration of water is there. You can see it number 1 on this map. Ecologic building is something that we will follow up. The integration of the green areas does happen here on this axis, where it tries to stay green, but yes, where the green structures will be maintained.
Can you give me something to drink?
Excuse me, I needed to drink some water. So, another point we have here is that, of course, the number 6, the integration of a playground for children with nature elements is there. The sound, protection from sound is here through this green area, which also, of course, the promotion of biodiversity will be looked at. Of course, there will be more trees, and we will look at the water permeating traffic areas can be created, and also the other points of good air quality and connecting the village and the rural areas will be ensured. I will pass word to my colleague Max Bacchus, who will talk about the mobility. And then afterwards, Madame Dupont will, from the jury, will explain the jury's considerations for this project. So when it comes to mobility, again, number point 1 is the shared space, which is here on the main street and also on some of the connecting streets, where, for example, on the street here that goes past the cemetery. The church square will be car-free in this project, only accessible for deliveries and for the fire brigade. Those are the little lines you can see here. Except from that, it's completely car-free. So we have the points 3 and 9 covered, the car-free spaces. Integrating the bus, which is point 4, well, we have the bus stop in front of the medical center, and for the other side, at the north of the village square, there would be another one. So the bus has been integrated into the project. As for the soft mobility, there are different connections and also some outside the perimeter, like this one here on the west, this green line, and the other one next to the rail where there will be soft mobility. So point 2 and 8, well, they have not been yet fixed because we're still talking about the areas outside of the perimeter. So this project has some good infrastructure for soft mobility. Number 6, we think the security of pedestrians has been improved. Point 7, parking or underground parking. Well, we have a public underground parking under the cultural center with direct access from the main road. There would also be electric stations for electric cars. And we have a second, smaller parking opposite the cemetery, where we also have some parking available for disabled drivers, and another one near the housing in the north and in the west. So, barrier-free, the idea is that all these places would be accessible for people with reduced mobility. On top of that, this project has the parking for drivers of a disability badge. And there's also would be an elevator for the underground parking to make sure that access is guaranteed for everyone there. So then to the strengths of this last project, the jury found that the big village square that they created here with a music kiosk, a pavilion, with the construction, that it's really interesting, especially the different activities, seating areas, the water fountains, trees. They really created some interesting small spaces here. And where the cultural center is planned, it gives it a more human dimension, and this project really has thought of enough housing. And they've also said things about different kinds of housing, so a healthy mix that should be in a center like this. So in this project, they also looked at the connection between east and west of the area that is to be planned, which the jury found they've done very well. And we really welcomed that the cafe, which is there at the moment, was integrated into the plan.
Then
I just talked about the cultural center and the human dimension it has, but the house in itself might be a little bit over-dimensioned, because we'd have to look into the next phases of this project. What happens with this volume? Should it be increased? Because it's very large. Then the parking to get to the cultural center seemed not very realistic to us, also very large, and we wondered whether that would really work the way it's set out now. The jury worries that even though the place is set up in a very interesting way, that it could still happen that it doesn't bring enough life, because the whole space lies in a ramp, and Of course, because it was important for people that there could be markets or a Christmas market or a concert. Well, the concert might happen, but a market might be difficult considering the topography. And then, like I said before, on the one side, it's very good because thought was put into the different kind of living, different kind of housing, different kind of types of housing. And they've been very clear that they would realize social housing, which they set in the north, in these two buildings here, which in the eyes of the jury is maybe not desirable, that we would do social houses on its own in the north next to the rails instead of mixing it up with the other living spaces. As for the recommendations, apart from the weaknesses, which of course will have to be remedied, would be the topography and the ramp for the cultural center, and also the topography, the situation created around the space in front of the church. And then there has to be some thought put into the parking concept. There's a lot of underground parking, and it's been optimized so much that there wouldn't be any reason to even walk over this space, so that won't make it more lively. So that would be the last participation of the jury, and I think Mr. Santer will come back.
Shall I go home now?
A very big thank you to Michel and Max, who have really presented these projects in great detail to us. Thank you very much, Madame Dupont, who gave us the ideas of how the jury looked at the strengths and weaknesses that they will pass on to the three planners. This was very well explained. Before we come to the questions, I think we wanted to see what the next steps are. Well, this is the moment where we have to say, this is also the moment where we have to say that we cannot take any more questions. We will close this email address so that we have time to analyze the last questions that have been sent. So how will we continue now? Okay, so today we had the digital presentation of the three projects. Now it's up to you out there to work a little bit. The questionnaires need to be looked at. We would be really happy if many people would answer our questionnaire, because it's about your opinion. We've said this a few times today, that your opinion is very important for us here at the municipality. It's about your village center. So please do take advantage of this opportunity and participate. The deadline for the questionnaire is the 6th of May, 2021. Like we said before, the political parties will also get the opportunity over the summer to give us their considerations and opinions. And so the first colloquium with the three planning partners, bureaus, will happen in the summer. What is this colloquium? Well, it's the three planners will meet with the jury, who will explain to them again in great detail what their strengths are, the weaknesses are, and what the recommendations are. And then there can be an exchange with them. By then we'll also have looked at the questionnaires, so what's important for you, the residents, and of course then also what the political parties have come up with, and we will give that to the three planning partners. Then the planning partners get time to integrate all this information into their project. So what you've seen today is not... The important message of today is that this competition isn't over yet. This is a participative project, and the plans that you've seen today are not the final ones. We will now get in touch with the planners and together with the jury, where there are many experts, and with the information that we got of you, to optimize these projects. So after they have done that, after all these recommendations have been integrated, we will do another set of citizen participation. So today we beamed into your houses, and we hope that once we've all been vaccinated, we can have a proper talk again where we can share the next information and see what you think of the new ideas that came in, so that we continue to have this good exchange and participation of you into the project. And this will, after that, we will again say to the jury and the partners what your impressions were, which were the last things that the jury have come up with, which are the last things that the residents, the citizens have said. So then the bureaus get, again, a little bit of time to work on their final projects. And our goal at the moment is that in the beginning of 2022, we would have the 3 final projects which would be presented to the jury, which will then decide which project in their eyes is the best, and that best project. So the most important message today is this isn't finished. You get the opportunity to join now and participate now, and then you will get another opportunity again. And the idea really is that we get the best project for the new centre, the further development of the centre of Schëtter. So now is when we get Mr. Leonard, which will do his important contribution.
Good evening. It's a great privilege for me to represent the municipality over here and ask the questions. In order to read, I have to get my glasses off, and to get my glasses on and the mask off. Now, during the presentation, as we expected, we tried to do it live, and we also tried to get the questions, regroup them together, because they, asked the same questions. And we tried to take in all the questions. Well, those which don't have anything to do with the project were basically left out. They will be answered by the municipal council, but it won't be done today. And I don't want to lose time, but I have about 18 odd questions, so let's get into that. Mr. Sander, the first question is to you, and you'll have to wake up for that. It's from Schëtter Music. We want details pertaining to the cultural center, cultural hall, and how many places are foreseen. Well, give us the details. Where is the rehearsal room, rehearsal hall? Is that within the cultural center and on the same floor as the cultural center, the cultural hall? Is that going to be for 300 spectators? Based on the stage, you'll have to have similar dimensions in both the cases, in the rehearsal and the main room. Well, they have really looked into this project very closely, and they know exactly what they want. Well, at this moment, I'll have to ask you for a bit more patience, because we are working on the urbanistic aspect of the project. And even though it is not an architectural aspect that has been covered, it is, well, an architectural competition is first an urbanistic contest where we look into the entire global space, where do various houses and the various shops will be built, and then we speak about the volumes, the breadth and the length and the height, and then you have the next phase, which goes into the details, where the facade is going to be looked into, the terraces, what the buildings are going to be made of, what is going to be taken into consideration, what the rooms are going to be, and that phase is basically a step too far right now. And we will then we'll have architects look into that, who are going to analyze or create those buildings. So we are just creating the spatial program as such, which was along with the German German consultants office, which came from Stuttgart, and and that is where everything was, those were the guidelines which led into this step, and these guidelines will lead into the next step. So, and if you see that in things that have been spoken or done in 2016 do not correspond to the reality of the day at a given stage, well, we can look at that at a later date and readapt the project accordingly. I hope I've answered all the questions. I have a second one. You might give me a similar answer, and I'll cite it, I'll quote it. Another association that is somewhat angry or frustrated, should we say. And I'll ask you this one too. And it's from the Scouts, Scoutcasters, that the three projects do not really correspond to our needs, or have not looked into our needs, and have not shown any interest in our needs, because they do not know about our activities. Well, there has been some sort of a slanting, a square answer, but the spatial program, which has been detailed over here, is your association was given as a next to these consultants, and they had a very limited time to work on these projects and to hand in the projects as such, which is probably why the contest is still not over. The competition goes on, and we are going to react to your reaction over here, and we are going to take it into the next round of discussions and the colloquium, and the officers, the consultants will look into that. And it's good that these questions can be asked and the answers can be given. Now, the next two questions can be grouped together, and have also come in a couple of times. So, when will these buildings, so for example, the cultural house, the chalet, and so on and so forth, be built? So, what is the phasing going to be like? What is it? It's the same. Are these projects more or less the same in terms of implementation and making them come true? And these are questions that the people are asking, which are quite important. It's very good that these questions are coming in right now, and one sees that there's a lot of interest in as to how the spaces are going to be used. And we have to, like I said, I have to push on the brakes a little bit because we have just spoken about the urbanistic aspect. We still have to go into the architectural aspect, and there are guidelines, there are specificities which are going to be underlined and taken in and set as guidelines for the next step of the competition. One has to think that the municipality does need a budget. Everything will not be built in one day. It is going to be in phases, maybe build 2 buildings together at the same time, simultaneously. And before that, we have to close this competition. We have to then take the winner, and we have to sit with them, and we have to find what can be done, how these constructions are going to be phased, and what these various functionalities of these various constructions are going to look like and feel like. Thank you very much for these answers. Next one is going to go to Mr. Agostini. We're going to leave Mr. Sander to rest a little bit, and I'll pass you on to my colleague.
So the second project, why was the second entry kept as even though it didn't include the shops that were part of the criteria? Well, the guidelines that we worked out with in the workshops, some of these guidelines were strict and had to be included in the project, and others were more soft criteria. So there's quite a few of the guidelines that they had to include and others that they could include. So in this second project, so we didn't exclude any entries that didn't include all the guidelines, those that weren't compulsory. But of course, it's something that we will talk with them about. If people are interested to know which criteria were compulsory and which weren't, you can look at the tender documents on the website of schütterange.lu /politics/Schëtter Duerfkär. So there you can look into the guidelines as they were given to the planners. Well, thank you, Mr. Agostini. Like we said, this competition isn't finished. We're in the middle of it, and of course the weaknesses that are in the projects now have to be improved. So as we're talking to Mr. Agostini, we'll continue with him. It's a question that's more precise to be answered. It's about numbers, and the question is how much units of housing will be built in the different projects? Well, I'm glad that we got this question before, so I could research that, and I can tell you that project from Metaform, so the first project we saw today, comes up with 14 units of housing. The second project came up with 46 units of housing, and the third project from Banini Pit is the one that came up with most units of housing, and it's 60 in total. Thank you very much. And I think that shows that quite a few people saw this as a weakness, that there wasn't enough housing. And I think here again, we have to stress again that the competition isn't finished and that these recommendations will be given to the planners. Now, if we continue, I have a next question for Madame Dupont. And the question given is you're talking about housing, and that certain projects do not give enough housing. What kind of units, what kind of housing will be created, and do we get social housing in the middle of our new village center? Well, thank you for this question. It's clear that we want housing to be created, and we also want affordable housing to be created. And this was one of the criteria. Whether these housing will be sold or whether they'll be up for rent, that is a political decision that has not been taken. In the actual situation that we are in Luxembourg now, we think it's important, and this is a message I really do want to give today, is that a municipality creates housing which is affordable for their own residents. I don't want to say social housing, but I really would prefer it if we talked about affordable housing, because we are looking at different types of houses. It's from young people to single parents to larger families, and I kind of want to get away from the negative concept of social housing. Of course, yeah, thank you for that answer. That's of course what we were looking for in the criteria. The next question is for you also, Madame Dupont, and that's, you've talked of weaknesses of different projects. So in project number 3, but I think it's in all projects, it was talked about, you talked about the weaknesses, but the weaknesses are not always in the recommendations that you've put for the Bureau. So don't they matter? No, of course they do matter. So in my presentations, where I looked at when I said the weaknesses and the recommendations, now that we go into the next phases, it's important that with the teams we talk about the weaknesses that the jury has identified. And that, so together with the recommendations, we will get better projects. I think the next question is still for the president of the jury. In some of these projects, it was said they are flexible enough, they can be adapted, and with others, it wasn't said that they are so flexible and can be adapted. So I think the idea is, again, that on all projects, we can continue to work on them. Yes, no, of course. We will continue. The next phase is the consultation rémunérée, so the paid consultation, and the projects that the jury has picked or retained have shown enough flexibility that they can all still be adapted in a next phase, and that we can continue to work on them. Thank you. Now we'll change the subject slightly. We'll go to mobility, to Mr. Bacchus, who's our expert on mobility. And we have a question saying that during the peak times, we have a lot of traffic on the main street. We all know this here. So what does the project see, how does the project foresee to improve this situation? Well, thank you for that question. It's a very important question, and of course the traffic on the street will continue. As, like Mr. Santos said, it is not possible for us to consider a bypass within this project, so we do have to see that the project will manage this traffic somehow. So we're looking at traffic calming measures. There's 20K zones, which can help to some traffic calming. On top of that, the different spatial planning and different usage of the streets should hopefully bring a better quality of life on the streets. So the pedestrian and the residents in this village square should feel safe and more comfortable. And of course, the cars will still be allowed there, but we're hoping that the project will contribute to it being better, and in the sense that pedestrians and cyclists are better integrated. Thank you for this question. And there is more questions about traffic. They're, of course, all a little bit linked. There is a traffic calming in... Is there the idea of traffic calming measures next to the church? Does Pont et Chaussée, have they worked on this project? Can it be implemented? And if so, how? And how does traffic calming guarantee accidents specifically with children? Yes, it kind of continues on from the last question. It's been a few years now that the state has come up with... it's been a few years now that the state allows us to reduce the traffic speed from 50 km downwards, even within our village. So Pont et Chaussée allows this if it can be done with measures of construction. So it's got to do with the spatial planning of the street, which are things that have been considered in the 3 projects, so that they should contribute to traffic calming measures. Explicitly for safety of children, I think there is a new situation. These will give a new situation on the street, but of course that will make it necessary for the parents to show their children the new situation and walk with them, so that they see where the new, how the new situation is and how it affects them, where the dangers are, and how to navigate the streets safely. So I have another question for Mr. Buckets, which is indirectly linked to traffic. Is it sure in these 3 different projects that there will be the same amount of parking spaces, or will it be less? The question is not whether there'll be more. Well, the main guideline that we gave to the planning bureaus is that we should look for a decentralization of parking. So that's how we get the car-free zones in the center and the underground parking, where it goes to the exact number of parkings. Well, they're different in the 3 projects. And again, we don't have a fixed number at the moment where we say this is what it should be like. This can still vary during the other phases of the project. They can still be adapted, but what's important to stress is that the biggest number of parking that we create, it also creates more traffic or more cars. So we have to find a good compromise in creating enough parking, but not too much. And of course, the promotion of soft mobility is important there. That's why we need to make these connections. The bus stops in the center. We have to make sure that they are well designed so that this mobility, this soft mobility, is really promoted, so that people don't always use their cars to get to the center of Schëtter. Well, as you've seen, traffic is very important in all these presentations tonight. Then we have a completely different question I will give to Madame Velez. Our municipality will surely grow, like many other municipalities, and so that means we also need space for tombstones, graves. Not everybody likes to be cremated. So do we have the space created? Well, in the cahier de charge, so in the guidelines, the creation or the increase of the amount of space for the cemetery was one of the main points. So, but in the moment, it's not like we don't have enough space, and concessions or the areas in the graves become free in the cemetery. So, but again, this is the right time to give the information to the projects that we do really have a demand for more space in the cemetery. And as it has been said, there is still flexibility, and we are still in time to ask for these things to be included in the projects. I think that answered this question. Then a question which I think is for Mr. Agostini. In the first project, it's quite clear how the problem it's quite clear how the different areas connect, and it's not so clear in the second and third projects. So the question is it done by a ramp? And then the question is, how will that work for a Christmas market on this ramp? Because this ramp is quite a big element. So I think it's a good question. Yes, it's a very good question. It's something that we in the pre-jury really analyzed. And we discussed this during the jury meeting. The first project, so it's the one with the 2 areas, which are developed, 2 or 3 areas. Of course, the cultural center would be on the other side of the street. Well, there it's quite clear. The events could happen on the top level, or on the middle level, or in front of the church, or in front of the municipal buildings. With the second project, the difference in levels or topography is remedied by kind of steps, where you could imagine that you could have stalls because the actual steps are, of course, straight, leveled. And then there is some place in front of the municipal buildings and in front of the church where you could have stalls. We shouldn't forget that this space isn't small. It has the dimension of the Place Guillaume in the city center together. So in the second project, of course, we'd have the cultural center, which would be there. So it gets reduced by that. So I think in the second project, it would also be possible to have a Christmas market. Where it gets more complicated is in the third project, indeed. And that is one of the comments that the jury made, because the slant or the ramp is too much. And so that's why during the next jury meeting, and Madame Dupont said it, this is one of the weaknesses of that project. And we will have to remedy this in this project. Thank you, that answers that question. Just to calm you down, these are the last 4 questions, so we won't be here until 11 o'clock.
So the last 4 questions. And we expected this one, and it is here. Why is a cultural center foreseen at the church square? Because it does create noise. And why does it? I mean, it has been spoken in length and breadth. So the question goes to Ms. Dupont. Why is it happening? Well, because simply because it was one of the recommendations or prerequisites of the requirements, prerequisites, sorry, and therefore and that was something that was, since these guidelines come in from the previous discussions had, there were no political discussions, and the people decided that, and we just took it on as such, as is. Well, that quite clearly answers the question. What about the construction? Well, I think Ms. Salis will be able to.
Als ein Klo 4 gab, dat so viel Bausubstanz wie möglich soll gehalten gehen.
So there's a little statement which says that the current state of constructions should be maintained. And why then do you think that certain buildings will be destroyed completely? And, well, the service technical department actually said that, well, was the one that expressed that need. So there was the nunnery, which was supposed to be, which is right there, has been maintained because it is a protected building. And for the rest of it, I think they had to, well, come up with ideas. And in the third project, in the second one, it's not been held. Yeah, let me check. So the second one has maintained the building, and the first one and third one have not. And when you look at the text, the descriptions, you understand why these various decisions have been taken. And so the technical department and the priest's house should be maintained, and the rest of it can be reviewed or rebuilt. Next to are also going to be or short answered questions. Mr. Backus? It's good that people are interested in participating into the project. So how's this cycling path going to go into the into the center? Well, it's basically, if you look at the orange background lines, which are basically the potential cycling paths. So these are just conceptual lines. And it can be looked into, but it's not a definite integral part of this project. I think I expected that question to be answered in unclear words, but yeah, there we are. You've made it clearer for me, at least. And have you foreseen public toilets? Because that is a very that is something which is within my competency, and I can tell you that yes, there are public toilets over there, and it is good that people have reacted in a very short time, and they have looked into the project, and they have asked for very specific questions, and the answers are, do provide good answers where there is a certain amount of flexibility which is being provided with regard to the cultural center. And for the associations which think that things are going to change, because everything is adaptable now at this stage of affairs. Please do fill out the questionnaires which are being sent out or have been sent out, And these questions, your answers are going to be very important for the juries to not only give an expert advice, but also to know what the people wish for, and they will base themselves on what you want. So it is very important that you share your thoughts, be they questions, suggestions, above all suggestions. So thanks a lot for all the questions that you have sent in thus far. I would like to point out over here that we have recorded this and it can review it. You can look at it. And those who did not have the time to go through the entire video, the entire presentation this time, you can review it, we can go through it, and thank you very much for your cooperation and working together. We are coming to the end of this digital workshop based on various questions that you asked, and we could bring it to you. I hope we could clarify it, some aspects of these projects. Thank you very much to everyone who has participated actively in these. Mr. Agostini, Ms. Dupont, Mr. Bacchus, Ms. Zelis, Mr. Lehnert, who had a very good, very tough job to work in the background, and they actually took all the questions and put forward to us so that we could understand them and you could understand them. So thank you very much to everyone who have done all this job, all this work. It is one things that you might be in an RTL studio, and it is a very new experience for us. And thank you very much to the translators who are translating into French and English, especially given the everything that we told over here. And thank you very much to the commune, the municipal council, who are helping us and building everything and give us the means to have this, to present this project to you in digitally, be it. So thank you very much to them. Please, I would like to appeal to you again. Please participate in this in this poll. Answer the question, provide your answers to the questionnaires, and let's overcome COVID together. The next workshop, citizens workshop, I hope we will be able to meet together. We'll be able to see each other in the eyes, have a glass together, and hold each other by the hand. Thank you very much for everything. It's been a long evening for everyone, and I hope that it brought you the information that you sought. Thank you very much, and good evening, and hopefully see you in autumn in face-to-face.